All right, so this is Chromebook best practices. The topics we will be discussing today are how to use student devices, just basic understanding of Chromebooks, some classroom organization ideas. We'll have a little discussion about digital citizenship and privacy, some classroom expectations and time management ideas, and then some ideas for integrating technology, blended learning, whatever you want to call it, but using computers in the classroom when we're back on campus face-to-face with students. So first up is understanding student devices. What is a Chromebook? It's a laptop. It works on the Google Chrome operating system. It works on the cloud, which means that everything, including your files, your apps, everything lives on the internet when you sign in. It's great because it works very well with all of the Google tools that we use. So you don't have to worry about misplacing files or not clicking save. That was a real issue. I always had students with their Microsoft Office documents not click save and then lose all their work. So you don't have to worry about that with Google. And storage is great because it's stored on the cloud. So, if students lose or break an individual Chromebook, they're not going to lose their work because all of that lives in their drive. So students should be saving everything to their drive. Storage on the actual Chromebook itself is limited. It has just a little bit of storage. Students can plug in headphones to their Chromebooks. It is, of course, up to the school policy, students' individual plans, and teacher discretion to allow students to use headphones in class. Students are allowed to download certain apps that have been unblocked by APS. They can visit approved websites and do schoolwork on their APS-issued Chromebooks. We have a link here to the full Chromebook training. I forgot to share this link with you. I can get that for you at the end of the presentation, so you have access to all of the links that are available here. So first up is how to log into a Chromebook. When your students open it up for the first time, they're going to have to log in with their full APS email address. So it's their 98 whatever number at aps.edu. They will have a password that they will be logging in with. They can change the passwords themselves for 3rd grade through 12th grade, excuse me. If they need help with passwords, they can contact the service desk. They can either email or call. Once they've logged in the first time, it doesn't make them put in their email address the second time. Then they can just log in with their password. How to log out of a Chromebook. Most kids don't log out. Most kids just close the lid, put it in their backpacks, open it the next class period. That's fine for the most part. It will make them sign in again when they close the lid. But if they want to actually sign out of the Chromebook so that somebody else can use it and not be on their account, they're going to go to, I always say the time because it's the best indication for students, but in the bottom right corner, there's going to be a little image of their internet, battery, and time. So they're going to click on that, and then they can click on the sign out button here. That way, a different student can sign into the Chromebook. They should also be powering down with the power button that's located right here. I worked at a one-to-one school before this job, and I had students who literally never shut down their computers, which meant that it never updated. Chromebooks automatically update as long as they are shut down. So daily is great, but certainly students should be shutting down their computer at least a couple of times a week to make sure that those updates are going through and the Chromebook has a chance to, rest and refresh and be ready. If they notice that their Chromebooks are really, really slow, that's the first suggestion, is to have them shut down their Chromebook and then turn it back on so that all the updates go through. Applications. So Chromebooks are set up with applications. There's no real desktop. It looks a little bit different from your Apple or PC laptops. At the bottom here are going to be their commonly used apps that are called the dock. So they can click right here and go all automatically to Chrome, email, docs, whatever they have saved down to the bottom, they can move things down to their dock. If they click on the little search button in the corner here, this little round button in the bottom left corner, it can open up and then they can view all of the apps that they have available on their Chromebook. They can search for apps. I know it's teeny tiny probably on your screen, but there's little tiny dots on the right side here. Students won't realize that they can click on those little dots and see multiple screens of apps. So if they'll say, Miss, I can't find Excel, then you say, well, it's alphabetical, it's probably on the second page. And then they click on the dot and then they'll be able to find that. Or sheets or whatever. I'm just thinking of one that's at the end of the alphabet. Anything that students want available on the dock at the bottom for quick access, they can right click on it and then click Pin to Shelf. So if you want them to have access to their Google Drive, you would have them go to the little circle, open up all of their apps with the little up arrow, right click on the Drive one, and then Pin to Shelf, and it will be available down at the bottom here. This little app area is also how they get to their camera app. Using the camera can be really helpful. I've seen teachers do things like have students take pictures of their notes. So have them literally hold up their notebooks to the camera and take a picture of their notes to upload to Classroom or Seesaw. They could take pictures of, posters, in-class assignments, things like that. They can take selfies. They can use that camera to film short videos. We have a foods teacher that's trying to plan some at-home labs. So things like putting their Chromebooks in the kitchen, turning on the camera and recording themselves while they complete their foods lab and make food in the kitchen. That's all possible with a Chromebook. They just have to know to go to the camera app. Once you open that camera app, it works very similarly to a cell phone camera. It's pretty intuitive. Kids usually figure it out pretty quickly. If you're using Seesaw, you would have students go to Seesaw, web.seesaw.me or on the my.aps.edu, and they can use the camera in Seesaw also. So the Chromebook touchpad. Most Chromebook touchpads don't have any buttons at all, and that can be very confusing for students who aren't used to that. Some things to know is that with the touchpad, usually you tap or thud, you don't click. Some of the touchpads, you can fully click down on them. Some of them you can't. So we have to teach our students to tap instead. Some things that you can do in a Chromebook are if you do a 3-finger vertical swipe where you literally put 3 fingers on it, that will open up all of the programs, and then students can close programs that are open that might be slowing things down. If they use 3 fingers side to side, it will actually move between the tabs they have open on the internet. They will right click by tapping the trackpad with 2 fingers. A lot of people who are new to touchpads don't realize that you don't need a right click button. You can right click just by a 2-finger tap. And then they can scroll through things with 2 fingers. So if they do 2 fingers up and down, they can scroll down a website instead of having to go to that little tiny scroll bar on the right-hand side. And then if you would like to share this information with your students, there's actually videos about how to use your touchpad so that you can show students with like little finger graphics so they can see what that looks like. Because especially for our younger students, learning how to use 2 or 3 fingers to touch when they've been using iPads and they're used to 1 finger, there's a bit of a transition. So just be aware that that is a difference, and you will have to teach them how to right click and how they can use multiple fingers for different things. Some keyboard shortcuts. These are great, especially for older students who we want them to move a little quicker through the material. This is a graphic that you could print and put in your classroom. There's a lot of different keyboard shortcut posters out. They're very similar or the same to some of the keyboard shortcuts you have for Windows. For Mac, usually they're the same, but it's Command instead of Control. So like Control X for cut, Control C for copy, Control V for paste. Those are the same for all types of computers. Some helpful ones for students. If they hold down Control Shift and T, they can reopen a tab that they've closed. If kids have lots of tabs open, sometimes they close ones they don't mean to. Screenshot. This is a really good one for teaching students who need to keep track of the work that they're turning in. They can screenshot with the control, and then at the top where you have your F1, F2, F3 buttons, there's a little print screen button that looks like a rectangle with 2 little lines. So they can do control and then print screen, or they can do control shift print screen and then choose an area with a little slider so they can select an area for a screenshot. So taking screenshots on a Chromebook is actually super easy and helpful for, taking pictures of stuff that they're showing on the computer. Some Chromebook settings. So when they go to the time or the little battery button in the bottom right corner, this is a big version of what it's going to look like. There's the sign out button in the top and the power off button. There's also a little lock button. They can lock their device, which means that they can not close the lid, but step away from it and other people won't be able to use it. They'll have to log back in once it's locked. The settings button here will bring up more features that older students might want to play around with. For the most part, for our younger kids, just being aware of what's here on this screen would be good enough. The internet, our Chromebooks should all be able to access the APS internet without needing to sign in or anything. If they go home and want to use their Chromebooks at home on the internet, they will have to click on this button, locate their home internet name, and then type in their password. Bluetooth, they can use Bluetooth headphones, or we have some kids who bring in their cell phones and use it as a hotspot, so they'll need to turn in Bluetooth for that. Notifications, you can have students turn on notifications, go through here and choose which ones to turn on. Accessibility features, these are great for our younger learners or special ed learners. The special ed department has a lot more information about using accessibility features. Volume and brightness, a key for your older students, they will turn the brightness all the way down so that you have to get really close to see their screen. And they'll do that so that they can hide that they're playing games during class. So if you walk around the room and you notice a kid's brightness is turned all the way down, have them turn it up because they are probably trying to play a game. The volume, you may want to have them play with the volume, especially if they're using headphones. You don't want it to blast them in the ears. The headphones that APS have provided are limited so that they can't go up too loud. All right, testing apps. If you're going to use Chromebooks for testing, and some of our younger students use iStation, that's a pretty common one. The ELL students will use the DRC Insight. College Board would be for our AP testing. Students are actually going to have to log out of their Chromebooks. And then once they're on the home screen where they're supposed to log in, down at the very bottom in the left corner will be this apps button. And that apps button will pull up all of the testing apps that are available. So some students struggle with that the first time because you're like, log out of your computer, and they're like, but then I can't use it. So you have to show them to go to the apps button to then use the tests. So the only thing is you can't monitor using GoGuardian, but the whole reason of having them log out and go to the apps here is that these are secure. They can't use their Chromebooks for anything else. They can't access the internet when they're in testing mode. So back when we used to do the state testing, and I don't know what that's going to look like this year, they would log out and do the testing here in the apps or kiosk mode. And then that way you don't have to worry about them Googling for answers or chatting with their friends. So some basic Chromebook Q&As. These are questions that have come up commonly. You may have more, and I'll stop after this to see what other questions you have about Chromebooks. But can they print from their Chromebooks? The answer is sometimes. It depends on the printer they have at home or at school, and APS doesn't support personal printers. So best practices would say if they need to print something, the teacher should try to print it for them. And if they're trying to print at home, then the parents will need to troubleshoot that as best they can. What if my student's Chromebook won't connect to the school internet? Try having them log out and log back in. Try having them shut down. Try having them hardwire in with an Ethernet cable. It looks like a phone cable, but it's thicker. And if none of that works, then have them call the service desk. Can students take screenshots? Yes, they can. It's a very helpful tool. Can students force close an app that is not responding? I know on Windows machines, I have to do that all the time where something just stops working. So to force close an app, they're going to click Shift Escape to open up the task manager, and then they can go through and close anything that's open that they don't want open. And then can students take pictures? Yes, there is a camera app. It's built in on the front of their device. There are some of our Chromebooks have 2 cameras also. The pictures will be saved to their Chromebook, so then they will need to upload those to Drive or Classroom or Seesaw. One of the questions I've asked is, what can Chromebooks do? What can't they do? They can browse the internet on Chrome. They can't use other internet browsers. So if students are used to using Safari or Firefox or something else, they can't use those. They can stream music or videos. If it happens over the internet, they can do it. They can use all of the Google apps. They can use the web-based Microsoft Office app. They can't download Microsoft Office to the Chromebook to use, but they can use the web-based version. And there's a link here to the online Microsoft Office. All students and staff actually have a Microsoft Office account so that they can log in and use Word or Publisher, whatever you like to use. They can download apps and extensions from the Chrome store. We'll get to the list of approved ones. So they can use those. They can take photos. They can save to Google Drive. They can use Google Tools offline. There are a few things they have to do to use them offline. I had students in my old school that had very long bus commutes. And so they would sometimes download documents that they then wanted to work on the bus so that they could, use their time efficiently. They will automatically update upon shutdown. They are much safer from viruses than Windows computers, so that's nice. They can use light web-based versions of software such as Adobe or Pixlr. Pixlr is a great one for photo editing. They have a great battery life. Most Chromebooks have a battery life of an average of 8 hours, which means they shouldn't be charging at school all the time because they should be charging at home, and then it should last throughout the day. They're relatively hardy and drop resistant. They've done tests. They've actually stood up very well to drop tests. Now, does that mean students should be kicking them down the halls? No. But if it accidentally falls off their desk at school, it's probably going to be okay as long as it's not happening every day. What they can't do, they can't use other internet browsers such as Safari. They can't go into incognito mode. This is important, especially for high schoolers and middle schoolers who try to get away with not doing their work. Since they can't go into incognito mode, they can't use the internet without APS knowing about it. So that's a good safety security feature. You can't sign into a student Chromebook with a non-APS account. So only APS student accounts and APS staff accounts can log into a Chromebook, which means students can't use their personal accounts on the school Chromebook. Another safety issue, they can't go to websites that aren't approved by APS. They can't get around it by using their personal account. They are a little limited in things like photo editing, video editing software. They're not super powerful. So things like using CAD design software, really hard to do on a Chromebook. They can't get the full Adobe suite. There are online options for Adobe. They're not great at multitasking. When students open too many tasks or apps, they do slow down a bit. So we do need to make sure that students are closing tabs that they're not using. I would have kids that would preload all of their YouTube videos for lunchtime or the bus ride, and having all those tabs open with all those YouTube videos made their Chromebooks incredibly slow. So we have to remind students that if you can't get your work done during class, it might be because your device is slow. Close all those tabs and apps you're not using. They are a little bit slower, lower powered. I considered doing this presentation from my Chromebook, but getting on the Meet does slow down a Chromebook a bit. They're perfectly fine for what students are doing in school, as long as they're trying to do 1 or 2 things at a time, not everything all at once. They do have some limited function when offline. So just be aware that if students have spotty internet access at home, that might affect their ability to do homework. And they do have a smaller hard drive size, so they need to make sure they're saving everything to Google Drive. So I've got a list here of the approved apps, add-ons, extensions, and supported applications from APS. So if you're ever wondering, what can I get my students? What can they save to their Chromebooks? What extensions can they get? We've got a complete list here. If there's an app that's not on the list that you would like us to look at, there's actually a form you can fill out to get that extension reviewed and possibly unblocked, depending on what it is. We check for privacy, whether it costs money, things like that before we approve them as a district. So most of the apps that we use commonly, things like Flipgrid, Padlet, Seesaw, YouTube, all of those have been unblocked and are ready to go. A lot of the educational websites like Khan Academy, Prodigy, things like that, those are all approved and ready to go. Students may encounter blocked websites. They may get a screen that looks something like this. If they're searching for something that's inappropriate, has bad language, naughty pictures, it's going to be blocked. If it's a game, it's going to be blocked. So if you're going to have students do something over the internet, like go to a website, best practices would say to try to check out the site before you start teaching so that you don't have a bunch of kids go, Mister, I can't get to this website. Check it out in advance of the lesson so that you may need to have a workaround. We can also unblock sites that are blocked with this request form. Similar process to the apps. We make sure that it's a safe website. There's nothing inappropriate. Privacy policies, that's really important. So just best practices, check it out before you get there. If you've got a kiddo you can trust, just look over their shoulder and say, hey, can you go to this website and check it out for me, see if you can get in. And we can do that too and check for you also. There's also a way to check using GoGuardian. All right, and then I've got a whole list of resources here that you can actually share with your students because we know that you don't want to spend the whole first couple of weeks of school teaching kids how to use computers. We've done a lot of the work for you and have resources prepared that you can send home to families. So yeah, please feel free to lean on us to help support your students and parents and families with using their devices because they have been using them over the summer. A lot of kiddos are going to be much better at it. Our incoming second graders switching to Chromebooks may have some issues. And so whatever support you can give them, we've got some stuff here, including a tech prep letter in both English and Spanish that you can send home to families to say, these are some ways that you can be ready for school and keep your devices safe. So as you're moving into your classroom and setting up your physical space, there's some questions you can think about answering, like how many students does your average class have? Desks or tables? Are you able to socially distance? How many kids are sitting together? Where are the outlets in your room? I know some of our older schools don't have a whole lot of outlets for charging. Windows or overhead lighting. If you have a lot of windows, you can get a lot of glare on the screens. So do you want your kids to have their screens facing the windows or their faces facing the windows? Like, where's all that? Where's your Promethean or projector? Where's your teacher desk? Where's your teacher computer? How are you going to set that up? Are we still practicing social distancing? I think the last I heard was 3 feet, but who knows? How much class time will be spent on devices on average? Are devices going to support your physical activities and learning in the classroom? Or are you going to do most of your learning on the devices? Like how much are they going to use their Chromebooks? How do you want your students to interact with each other, with the teacher, with their devices? You can see in this little picture here, these are all pre-COVID pictures I found on the internet. These kids are sitting pretty close together so that they can see their screens while also still having a conversation with each other. Am I going to allow students to use headphones to do their work? That's a big question. Depending on your school policy, some schools are weirdly strict about this and want no kids to be on headphones because they think that music can be distracting. I think that if I'm in a room full of people and I need to write an essay, I want to put on my headphones so that I can block out the noise from everybody else in the room. You will have students with IEPs that require headphones, so that's another option. Has your school handed out those headphones that were delivered at some point at the end of last school year? Do you have a class set of headphones? Does every student come to school with their own headphones? Will I allow students to listen to music during independent work time or during breaks? That's a choice you're going to have to make. How will I handle transitions between classes? If you teach secondary and you've got groups of kids moving in and out every, with 5 or 7 minute passing periods, how are you going to get all of the kids and all of their devices out of the room, clean the room, and the new kids with the new devices in between? And then do we have protocols in place for lost, forgotten, or stolen technology? We have some documentation from the district. Hopefully your school has talked about this also, and you've got some strategies in place for when students forget their computers at home. It will invariably happen that they will forget their computers at home. So some things you can do as you're setting up your room. This is just one example of a seating chart of what it might look like. If you've got, students using computers a little bit less, maybe you want to have desks or tables for students to sit at for interactive work, and then computer stations where they can use their computers. Maybe you just want them to have their devices with them at their tables at all time. So spend some time as you're setting up your room, taking into account the technology needs of the student and the staff. I would really hate for you to get there on day one and it turns out none of your kids charge their devices over the summer, because that might happen too, and you've only got one plug that's available for students. Or you go to teach and you realize your teacher computer doesn't actually reach your Promethean from where you want it to, and now you have to worry about getting cables for everything. So work with your administration to get the tables, desks, devices, and extension cords or power strips that you need. And then consider using a seating chart to support students with laptop use in mind. Things like this seating chart where you have students sitting across from each other can work absolutely great. The computer itself is 8-10 inches tall. So that's going to provide a little bit of a barrier so that they're less inclined to talk to students across from them. That's totally great. If you have a room full of rows, that can work well too. Think about where those plugs are that they may need to charge during class. Are they going to be able to? What's your plan for students that need to charge during class? A suggestion for seating charts, this came from a high school friend of mine, is that for the first week of school, you let students sit wherever they want, figure out who's friends with who's chatty, look at their IEPs and 504s and who needs to sit at the front. And then once you've figured out who's going to talk with who, set up your seating chart so that you can separate the chatty kids and put the kids who need it in preferential seating. So I know a lot of teachers just do alphabetical order, but sometimes letting them choose where they sit and then determining afterwards, that can be helpful too. Of course, it's hard for secondary. A lot of them don't talk the first couple of days because they feel a little awkward, but give it a chance to try it out. Chromebook should hold a charge for at least 8 hours. However, students should bring their Chromebook and chargers to school every day. If you teach elementary and Chromebooks are going to be more supplemental instead of the main way that they learn, talk with your school about having a policy for leaving them at school, taking them home. What's the plan for that? However, you want to make sure those chargers are available, especially since we do have several different models of Chromebooks throughout the district. They don't all share the same type of charger. So borrowing their friends may or may not work. Having a class charger available may or may not work. This is a habit that we need to get students into, so we need to be flexible with them, give them a little grace, but also teach them the habits to remember school supplies. That just like we expect them to come to school with a backpack and paper and pencil, the laptop and their charger should be part of those supplies. If you have students who are coming consistently unprepared, they just leave their laptop at home so that they don't have to do any work, because I've seen those students. Follow the discipline matrix. It would be the same as if they came to school unprepared in any other way. So some suggestions for charging in class is to, if your school can do it and your room can do it, have enough power strips so that students can charge at their seats. That may or may not work for your seating chart in your room. Let students sit on the floor to charge as a reward for good behavior. When I taught high school English, my kids absolutely loved it if I let them sit on the floor to charge. It was like a reward. So something that was free, I didn't have to give extra credit. I would let them out of their seats every once in a while as a reward. And then of course, send reminder emails to parents, guardians, and students about the importance of coming prepared, including chargers. And we've got some of those letters back in the slide about student resources that you can send home, so you don't have to spend all your time writing a letter for that purpose. So some day-to-day teaching ideas. Consider organizing your room in such a way that students can use their device and then stow them for tech-free time. Depending on what desks or tables you have, students may have their backpacks available with them. They may hang up their backpacks at the back of the room. You may have desks like these where they can put their laptops inside the little desk spot or underneath their seat. So as you're setting up your room, think about, when I want them to have their device, do they have room? When I want them to put it away, where are they going to put it? How can I make that quick? So to support quick transition time. Don't feel like all your learning has to take place in front of a Chromebook, but do think about what activities can I do in person, on paper, in groups, discussions. What can I do online? If I'm doing worksheets, can I do those online to save on having to go make copies? Consideration is to use Google Classroom or Seesaw to organize and assign all of your work. This is great because it'll support students who are absent for the day. And then it's a good way to show your administration and parents what's going on. So then you don't have to have the folder at the back of the room with work for absent students. So these are some ways that might make it a little bit easier for you. A good idea is to have students close their Chromebook lids when not in use. This will not only save battery, more importantly, it'll limit distractions and limit them Googling answers if you're doing some sort of group work or teaching at the front of the room. Have students take screen breaks and brain breaks. Just like you and me, I get super tired when I sit in front of the computer for 8 hours a day doing work. Students need to get up out of their seats every once in a while. They need to take screen breaks and do things, with paper and pencil every once in a while. And then, of course, have a backup plan for when technology isn't working. The internet will go down. I don't know when, I don't know for how long, but that is a fact of life, that the internet will go down. So what's your backup plan for if it was assigned on Classroom and I don't have any copies? Now what do I do? That's part of teaching in a one-to-one environment, is we have to be flexible and have a plan for how is this going to work when my students can't connect to the internet. And if you've got kiddos who left their Chromebooks at home, or they're dead and they don't have a charger, what's your backup plan for them so that they can still participate in the activities, in the learning? Think about setting up your daily routines to maximize time spent teaching and learning. Nobody likes to waste a bunch of time in transitions. So make sure that before students get out their Chromebook, that you have a clear purpose for their use and communicate it clearly to students. It's great when you're planning to think about, what's my activity? What are they using their computers for? Do they even need their computers? Should they just come in and get started on something on paper and pencil? Consider using tech tools for a bell ringer. You come into the room, you open your device, you get started on the bell ringer, you're working quietly while I take attendance. So some ideas for that would be things like asking a question on Google Classroom. That question feature, while it doesn't sync with the Synergy Sync connection, it's great for a quick way to either have a discussion or read one answer at a time from students. Students can journal on a Google Doc. You can start a doc that is their journal and have them add entries instead of doing a spiral notebook journal. Think about having a process for packing up Chromebooks so that students take them home and charge them there. Make sure that packing up supplies securely is part of that, so that they're not shoving their Chromebook in their backpack with their box of chocolate milk, which is going to explode and ruin the device. For our younger kids, for sure, we have to support them with that. And then a lot of our students have been using devices for a while, but for those who haven't, make sure that we're teaching them how to handle their devices to limit damage. If they do have to move it around the room, they should be holding their device with both hands. They shouldn't drop or hit their devices. I've had kids that get frustrated at their computers and literally punch the screen. Bad idea. Students should be eating or drinking near Chromebooks. If you allow snacks or beverages in your room, make sure you've got a process for, water bottles only with lids, or have a designated snack area, or put the Chromebooks away in a safe place before snack time. And then if students do need to clean their Chromebooks, I mean, I hope they do, otherwise those keys get awfully sticky. They should be cleaning with a soft cloth and no harsh chemicals. Generally, like, the eyeglasses, those microfiber cloths, those are great. Just a little bit of water. Never spray the device itself, spray the cloth and then wipe it down. All right, some digital citizenship ideas and some privacy. It's a good idea to consider printing or making a poster for computer use rules. These are two examples of posters that I found. And if you click on the image, they're actually linked. You don't have to create it yourself if you can find one that prints, but it's a good idea to have computer use rules somewhere available in the classroom so that you can all be on the same page for what is allowed and is not allowed. It's a good idea also to model best teaching practices with students. For example, creating passwords. Third grade on up, kids have the ability to create their own passwords. We want to make sure that they are safe passwords, that they're not sharing with others. So a password like 1234 or password, terrible idea. Using their own name or their names of their pets, terrible idea. So this is a real world skill that we could start teaching students, how to come up with passwords that are going to be safe. So I've got a couple of websites here that links to ideas for passwords. Don't use common words. If they go along the line and pick all the letters that are next to each other, those are neighboring keystrokes. Repeated characters, so 1111, AAAA, or alphabetical or numerical order. Those are both wrong, bad ideas. Birth years, that's something pretty easy for people to get a hold of. And then complete date, having them do like their full birthday or their mom's full birthday. All of those are easily guessable by other people. So what you can do is come up with a strong base password. So for this example, it's got a number, a symbol, uppercase and lowercase letters. And then you can have that base password be used for multiple websites or tools, and then add a piece to it so that it's not guessable by others, but it's like, here I use it for Facebook, so I'm going to add an FB. And then I use it for Instagram, so I add an IG. And then what you can do is have students write them down somewhere secure. Don't put a sticky note with your password on your computer. We've seen teachers do that, not a great idea. But write it somewhere where only they know what it is. I wouldn't label it with my password and then all the letters. But like if they write it, I don't know if anybody's doing a paper agenda anymore. They write it somewhere in like the back of their notebook and it's not labeled, but then they can look it up if they need to. And then there's some tricks for remembering passwords. Things like if you take a short phrase and use the first letter of each one, that's a great way to create a password that's memorable because then they can memorize the phrase. Some things that we can also model for our students are how to be good internet digital citizens. So we need to be aware of targeted advertisements. How many times have you been talking about something and then all of a sudden you get advertisements on your Facebook for that thing? They're listening to us. Those things can be very enticing where you want to then spend your money. Kids are being advertised to all the time through websites and TV and social media. So just be aware that if it's a website that's trying to sell you something, it's probably not a great source. It's not something you should be using for research, for example. Social media, especially for our older students who are really delving into the social media world, we should all be careful of what we share. For students, at some point, they're going to have that discussion about, appropriate posts, not sharing nude pictures, things like that. But even as teachers, we can model that because if you've ever Googled your own name and see what you find when you Google your own name, your students can find that also. So if your social media is not locked down and your students Google you, they might be seeing things that you don't want to share with them. Watch out for scams. We all get those emails, or phone calls. They're getting a little more sophisticated than the Nigerian prince wants to send you money. This example here was from a university that says that your password will expire, and then to put in a new password. So that's the kind of thing where if it looks like it's not quite real, question it and teach our students how to watch out for those scams also, to not give away their personal information. Be careful if you're ever on public Wi-Fi. If you go to Starbucks and use your computer, anything you share over that may be able to be accessed by other people who are also on that same Wi-Fi. So, hopefully our students at their home internet have password protected internet. And then if you're out in public, just make sure you're not doing anything like filling out IEPs while at Starbucks. That'd be a terrible idea. Watch out for malware and viruses. Less of an issue for Chromebooks, but still, this is one of the reasons why we lock down which websites they can visit, so that they're not going to those nasty websites that are going to give their computers a virus. Emphasize student safety when communicating online. One thing that students like to share on social media are things like their location, their full name, their address, things that might reduce their safety. So make sure we're not only modeling that, but we're teaching our students that there are certain things you should not be saying out loud on the internet. And then remind students that there's always a person behind every screen. When we become keyboard warriors, it's really easy to say things that might hurt somebody's feelings that we wouldn't say in real life, but because we don't see them face to face, we feel okay saying it. So if they've ever been bullied in real life, if they've ever been bullied on the computer, if they've dealt with anything like that, they may know it. They may not. They may think that, who cares? I'm just saying words. But, words can hurt. We have to remind students to be aware of what they're saying. All right, I have linked here all of our acceptable use policies as a district. So these are things that hopefully your schools are sharing with your students. We've got the Student Success Handbook. The Student Disciplinary Matrix should also be available. So things like using the computers for inappropriate things, non-schoolwork things, those are all definitely against the rules. So those are all spelled out for students in case you ever have any questions about what is acceptable. There's even a link here for the fines, fees, and charges for lost, stolen, broken devices. So when you get a second, please check those out. The basic rules are students should be using school devices for schoolwork. They should not be using them for personal play. Their parents should not be using them. We've had some issues with parents using student devices for inappropriate things. And then we've had some really awkward conversations. So just as a general rule, that's the language we can share with our students. School computers are for school work only. All right, classroom expectations and time management. I know that we are all incredibly busy, and managing devices is just one more thing that are on our already busy plates as teachers. So hopefully we can set up some classroom expectations at the beginning of the school year to make it move smoother, as well as some tips for time management so we're not reinventing the wheel all the time. So again, just like posting our classroom rules, if we post our classroom expectations and we set clear expectations for Chromebook use, that can help make things move a little easier. So if you add those computer use rules to either your syllabus, your Google Classroom, your Seesaw, your wall posters, your communications with parents, like set those rules out there and then share them widely so everybody knows we're on the same page. Don't try to be the internet police, because kids will get away with some stuff, but the more visible we are as teachers, when we walk around the room, when we set students so we can actually see their screens, it helps us be aware of what the students are doing without having to look over their shoulders at all times. As always, make sure that you have a clear purpose and communicate that with students for why we're using our computers. And then decide on consequences for when students misuse the computers. Make sure you're following your school policy and your discipline matrix. Do allow for occasional mistakes. Students will push the limits, especially those middle school and high school students. They will try to get away with as much as they can, but sometimes kids make mistakes. Sometimes they don't realize that it's not appropriate use for whatever reason. Be consistent and fair in following through. Just like any other school rule that you would enforce, make sure that you are consistent. And if if you say you're going to do something, you follow through with it. If devices do need to be taken away from students because they're using them inappropriately, make sure that students are still able to access the learning and participate in class. If you remove their device and you don't give them an alternative assignment, then you can have some upset parents that you are taking away their ability to learn. And obviously that kid's going to continue to be a behavior problem because they've got nothing else to do instead. I've had plenty of students who were addicted to video games or discovered that they could be a bully online, and you usually need to have some conversations with the parents, conversations with the admin, set up some procedures in place so that you can limit those distractions, limit their ability to use the computers inappropriately while still allowing them to participate in the learning. A few time management ideas to maximize your time learning and teaching. Again, assign everything in Classroom or Seesaw. It may take you a few more minutes to type it up in Classroom or Seesaw than just, handwrite it on the whiteboard. Running copies was a thing that I always hated to do because I hated going all the way down to the copy room. So if I could assign it on Classroom and then have students use their notebook paper to create the assignment, that was a win-win because then I didn't have to go anywhere. I didn't have to waste my own paper. I've worked at schools with a paper budget where we were only allowed a certain number of copies per year. If you assign it in Classroom, it can save paper, it can save time. I like to use really clear, thorough directions so that I have step-by-step, here's what you need to do in this order. This is great for a bunch of reasons. If you have students who are absent, they can still do the work from home or when they get back. Some students need more time. If you've got kids on 504s or IEPs with extended time, having those directions there are going to support them when they finish up during their extra time. ELL students often need multimodal instructions. So if you're saying the instructions and they can read the instructions and they can copy and paste them into Google Translate, then they can read it multiple times, hear it multiple times. Always giving students as many directions as possible to make it clear is going to support student learning. As a bonus, it's also going to mean that you get fewer emails from parents and students asking them what to do. It also, if you've got your administrator in your classroom as a co-teacher or your Seesaw class, it shows that you're supporting your students. So it may take a few more minutes to type up those clear directions, but it's going to be so much better for your students, so much more helpful. And if you use Classroom year after year or Seesaw year after year, you can then reuse those posts, reuse those assignments, and it'll save you time in the future. So it's kind of like doing all the work up front and then you can coast after that. Google tools such as Docs and Slides are always available to students and you don't have to click save. So if I can do the assignment on a Google Doc or a Google Slides or whatever, instead of handwriting it on paper, it's great. I taught English. Having kids handwrite a rough draft and then type it up took forever. If I have kids type up their rough draft, then they can go into their docs, share it with a partner, peer edit it, and then I can see all of their changes in their version history. They're not wasting a bunch of time handwriting something that they're just going to then type word for word. Kids don't actually improve much from a handwritten rough draft to a typed final draft. So I preferred, doing rough drafts in Google Docs. Students can also access those from home. So when you do on paper assignments and they leave those papers at school, they will come up with excuses for why they weren't able to finish their homework. So if everything's on Classroom and everything's available at all times, no excuses for not being able to do their homework. And then this is a good tip for teachers who have a million bazillion sticky notes taped to every surface of their life. Try using Google Keep. Google Keep is great. It's actually available. You can find it on Calendar over here or on your email, and then you can take notes. So you can create a note with a title. You can then take a note here, You can create bullet points. You have to do it first. I'm not great at keep. I just keep everything in my head and then I lose it because my head is full of stuff. So, you consider using Google Keep. You can actually cross things off from your to-do list. It's like a digital junk drawer. Some older students may find that helpful, even some younger students if you've got kiddos who have to write everything down. But Google Keep is a nice tip for keeping organized as a teacher. Some other things we can do to maximize our efficiency are to organize your Google Drive. I am guilty of this myself, where I just create stuff in my Google Drive and I don't always rename it, and then it's really hard to find later. So what we can do is use consistent naming conventions. So every time we create a document or a slideshow, don't just leave it as untitled. That's something students are usually guilty of. Help them title their documents. And then if they title it the same way every time, it can be really helpful to find it later. So for example, 2021 title of document, class period, or something like that, so that you can search for it in multiple ways. You can use folders and subfolders in your drive. So when I go to my Google Drive here, I've got my classroom drive folder. All of those are your assignments from classroom. Don't delete that. That's number one. Don't delete your classroom folder, because then it will just throw everything from classroom into your main drive and it's going to become a hot mess. But everything else here, you can create folders. And then inside the folder, you can then create subfolders with all of your content. Another thing you can do is add emojis to your folders. You just right-click at the front there, click on the word emoji, then you can add whatever picture you want. This is great for visualization very quickly of your different folders. You can even color code folders by right-clicking on it and then clicking change color. So then this way you can go through, like I've got a few here with emojis and pictures. So like Jamboards really stands out because it's got the emoji and then it's bright red. Pear Deck always uses the little pear emoji, so I can tell that very quickly. If you use good naming conventions, then you can use the search bar in Drive for quick searching. So you can always look by type, like the name of the document. And if you don't remember what it is exactly, you can do an advanced search where you can look for a specific type of document. So I want to look for presentations that are owned by a specific person. So like if you know a student shared something with you, but you don't remember what they called it, then you can type it in here. I'll just see if Karn has shared anything with me. And now it's going to pull up nothing, because apparently I don't have anything in my drive that he shared with me. But if I just look up, let's just look up presentations. Now I've got all my presentations that I've made or have access to. So that search bar can be really helpful. It's great to teach our students how to use it. But the problem is if students go through their drive and never have names for anything, let's see how many unnamed things I have. See, I need to organize it. Untitled, 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 untitled. You can't search for those. That's why it's important to name things the first time. When you're in your drive, that shared with me folder right here, shared with me, you can organize this. That's just a label that Google gives to anything that has been shared with you. Some teachers will try to go in here and organize it. Just ignore it. Just don't even try. There's no way to do it. Some time management tools that can support students. All APS students and Chromebooks have access to Snap and Read and CoWriter. Snap and Read is a tool that helps students annotate PDFs or fill out PDF worksheets. It can help them read texts out loud. They can choose how quickly or slowly to read it. It can do a text level switch. So if you assign them a document to read, like a story, they can actually click and drag and highlight the text, and it will switch out hard words for easier words. It can also help students create outlines with bibliographies. So if you have students who struggle with note-taking or research, Snap and Read is an amazing tool to help support students with all of these things. If you have a lot of worksheets that you've in the past printed off and assigned to students in person, you can assign those PDFs through Google Classroom or Seesaw, and then students can fill them out with Snap and Read. Some teachers really like Kami, and the tools for Kami are great, but it's an extra paid tool that APS will not pay for because Snap and Read already does all of those things. If you click on the links here, the picture and the text here are linked. It sends you the directions from the UDI department for how to use Snap and Read. So you can then find those directions, send them to your students, and they can learn how to use the tools themselves. Your special ed teachers also know about these tools and can help support your students with them. But they're available to all students, not just special ed students. Co-Writer is a great tool that can help with speech to text. So if you've got students who have physical disabilities or are just really slow typers, you can have them speak what they want to type and it will write it out for them. Co-Writer also has a built-in dictionary, so they can click on any word in a document or website and look up a definition. And it also has word prediction. So as they're typing on their document, if they have word prediction turned on, just like it is on your phone, they can choose the word instead of typing the whole thing out. So a lot of the tools that we have built in on our phones, these extensions here support students in accessing on their Chromebooks. How to get to your extensions, there's this little puzzle piece that lives here in the top right corner of your screen. If you click on it, I can see here's Co-Writer. It looks like a little thought bubble. And then Snap and Read looks like a little crosshairs. Students can click the little thumbtack to pin it to their extension bar across the top here. And then all they have to do is click on it. They'll have to probably sign in with their APS email and password, and then they just turn it on. Right now I've got the Snap and Read. I can show the outline. I can do the PDF reader. It's really just as easy as that. For Co-Writer, I can turn it on ever so slowly. And then when you're on a document, you can use Co-Writer to talk to text. And so if you need more help with those, please look at the instructions that are linked here. But those are great tools to support our students to save them time instead of painfully typing out one letter at a time. If you've got kiddos who just are really slow typers, I would suggest assigning one of those typing websites, to practice their keyboarding skills. I really wish we still taught keyboarding because, kids will do this the whole time and it takes forever. All right. Some other classroom management things we can do is use GoGuardian. APS EdTech has full trainings on GoGuardian. We are very happy to come out and support you or your school in using GoGuardian. So I'm not going to go through how to use it here. I'm just going to talk about it. If anything you see here sounds interesting and you want some more support, reach out and we can do a training on GoGuardian. What it is it is a tool that teachers can use during class period to monitor student internet use. Teachers can monitor student screens, take screenshots of what students are doing, view student browsing and search history, lock or disable screens so that they can't use the device. You can send private messages to students or send a group message to all your students. You can block or restrict websites that are not blocked from students through the APS web filtering. You can open a new URL in a tab for students. So if you've got kiddos that struggle getting to the website you need them to go to, you can open it for them. Now, GoGuardian only works on Chromebooks. It does not work on Windows or Mac devices that students are logged into. It doesn't work on iPads, but since you've got your kiddos coming to school with their APS Chromebooks, it's perfect. It's a great tool to use to support our students. So some ways that you can use GoGuardian in person, because I know a lot of teachers used it when we were working from a distance because we couldn't see what students were doing at home as much. I actually like it just as much for in-person teaching because you can do things like monitor students' web activity during tests and quizzes. If you want to make sure students aren't Googling answers behind your back, you can turn on GoGuardian and watch all their screens at the same time and make sure they're not going to Google and looking up answers. If you have a website or document you need all students to go to, you can just send it to them. And then you don't have to worry about wasting time with kids looking for the link in classroom or very slowly typing in www dot and then spelling it wrong. Just push that website out to them and then they can all go to it. If you've got kiddos that are distracted by things like Google Chat or YouTube, which are not blocked by APS, you can block it during the class period so that they can only use their devices for whatever it is you need them to use it for. You can lock all student devices for computer-free class time. Even when I told my students as a teacher to put away their Chromebooks, I'd always have that one kid at the back who was furiously trying to play a game without me noticing. So with GoGuardian, you can click a button to lock their device, and then basically it's a fancy paperweight until you unlock the device. So some of those kids that are addicted to video games really hate that. But it's a good way to make sure that they're focused on you and the class and the activity or discussion instead of trying to sneak games. You can send private chats to students. I know a lot of us really liked having Google Meet chat available or having Google Chat and talking with students, but that can become a little overwhelming or distracting. With the GoGuardian chat, it's only between you and the student. So that's really nice for sending messages like, hey, do you need any help over there? Without calling them out, without coming up to them in person. A lot of kids don't want to look like they need help, even when they do need help. And so if you can send them that private message that none of their friends are going to see, that can really support those shy students. You can watch student screens as they complete work individually. So instead of walking around the room and getting to see, a few kids' papers at a time, because that's all you can visually see, when you're on GoGuardian, you can see all of their screens at once. So if you assign them a math problem, you can sit down and see the step every kid is on at the same time. And then you can go, okay, I can see that little Johnny here isn't getting it. And then you can go support little Johnny. Instead of you're at this end of the room and Johnny's at the other end of the room and he has to raise his hand and wait for you to come over there. When students are completing group work, another way that's technology can really help that. I would always struggle because I'd be working with this one group over here and the other groups would be chatting about their weekend, or one kid would do all the work and the others would sit back and do nothing. With GoGuardian, you can actually see the students as they're working and say, man, this kid is doing all the work and the three of you are sitting here doing nothing, by watching their screens and seeing what they're doing. And then the last way GoGuardian can support classroom instruction is you can save student browsing activity in a report, in a PDF, and then you can share that with administrators or parents. So if you have some kiddos who are wasting class time and then going home and complaining to their parents that they have too much homework, you can prove to the parents that no, it's not too much homework. He wasted his class time on YouTube instead of doing the assignment. Some limitations to GoGuardian. It can't block apps on the Chromebook. So we know that a lot of kids are really into Minecraft. There's Minecraft for Education, which is an app that students can download to their Chromebooks. Unfortunately, you can't block that in a GoGuardian scene. It is best to set up sessions so that your use of GoGuardian doesn't interfere with other teachers using it. So if I lock student devices and I don't unlock them, when those kids leave my first period for second period, they won't be able to use their computers in second period. So it's a really good idea to set up sessions based on your periods so that you're not interfering with other teachers using it. You can't and shouldn't block outside of school hours. So if you've got kiddos who are sending bullying messages from home, parents can block Google Chat or Gmail or whatever using the GoGuardian Parent app, but that's not on you. Don't worry about trying to block outside of school hours. And obviously you can't block phone usage or personal devices that are not on APS Chrome account. So if you do have a few students bringing in their own personal computers, you got to make sure that they're on their APS account, because if they're on their own personal account, you won't be able to see their activity. A few more tips for using GoGuardian. You can use the calendar feature to schedule out classes. You can even schedule block classes that way. So that's nice if you're a high school teacher and you've got a rotating block schedule and it's hard to remember when every class period starts. If you schedule it in GoGuardian, it will automatically start and stop at the beginning and ends of your class period. There's a grouping feature now in GoGuardian where you can either use it to make your students match your seating chart, or you can move the students up the screen so that you can maybe watch students who need to be monitored more closely easily. The little thumbnails for each student, it's about 4 across, so you do have to scroll down to see your whole class. You should, of course, let students know that you are using it during class, and the best language is that you're here to support their learning and focus. A lot of them are going to feel like your big brother and you're always watching them, but if you say, hey, I want to support you in your learning, I don't care what you're doing outside of school, but you're here in school, you need to be working on schoolwork, that kind of language is more digestible to students. Don't use GoGuardian to track students outside of your class period. The school I worked at before, all students had study hall, and there were teachers who would get on and close all their YouTube tabs outside of class. If they're in study hall, I don't care what they're doing. That's their business. Don't do that. That's weird. Just worry about them when they're in your class period. And as always, remind students that APS devices are for school use only, that there is no expectation of privacy when using a school device at school during class time. So if they want to do illegal or naughty things, they need to do that on their own time, on their own devices. Just like backpacks and lockers can be searched, so can Chromebooks. All right, my last section is integrated technology and blended learning. I really thought about how best to set this up. And so I just came up with a bunch of ideas based on some common types of activities that teachers use in schools. I did try to make these as 2nd through 12th grade as possible. Based on what content you teach and what grade level you teach, think about how you might change some of these activities to make them more age appropriate for your students. So some language arts and writing, lots of different grades and lots of different content areas. Do research. All teachers should be worried about plagiarism. So if you're doing research with students, there's this explore button. And if you go to any Google app, you will see this explore button at the bottom right. You can click on that and it's going to give you suggestions for research ideas, suggestions for improving your slides, suggestions for websites to go to, and then it's got easy MLA or APA citations built in. You can teach students how to locate high quality sources using Google filters, or go to the library and have your librarian teach them how to use the search engines. Librarians love to actually have classes come in and teach them how to do things. And so if you do teach research, go to the librarian and ask for support with teaching research. But to use the Google filters, let's say they're doing a persuasive essay on why school should start later. I taught 9th grade English, and this was a very common topic that kids like to do. So there's going to be a bunch of websites here that may or may not be good quality. What you can do, oops, it's under tools, is go to tools and then you can change results. You can change time. You can change to, where is it, academic? Okay. Better teen grades. That's good news. So, teach them to search for terms that are going to support them in their research. Plagiarism, there's a bunch of plagiarism checkers. Google Classroom has an absolutely fantastic one that's built in, and teachers can run unlimited reports. So like unlimited assignments can have the plagiarism checker. You can also teach students to go to grammarly.com or plagiarismdetector.net. Those are both good sources to check for if they have uncited sources or if they just copy and pasted their entire essay from Wikipedia. I've seen that too. You can teach students how to cite sources correctly, which is even easier because it's built into the Google Explore button, or they can do it through Grammarly or other citation machine, EasyBib, sources like that. For essays, you can outline or do graphic organizers. You can use a table on a Google Doc, use Jamboards for collecting ideas. Peer editing is super easy by having students share their work with each other, and then they can work together. You can teach students how to use suggestion mode so that when they're on each other's docs, they're not just rewriting the essay for them, but they're suggesting it. And then as a teacher, you can go into version history on any of their assignments and see, what changes they made, how much help they got from a friend, things like that. And then I've got the crap test here. I forgot to talk about this. When you're looking at sources, you want to look for the currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. And if you print out a crap poster, kids think that's hilarious. Group work. You can use technology to support group work. It's so wonderful when you have kids on their devices sitting around, looking at their screens, and having a conversation across the table with each other. You can assign group work on Classroom or Seesaw. When you assign it in Classroom, make a copy for each student so that they don't accidentally edit your original. Then have one student in the group open up the attachment, and then that first student will share their document with everybody else in the group. Then they can all pull up the same document or same slideshow and work on it all at the same time. So let's say you gave them a worksheet like this Freyer model, and you could have student A open it and share it with students B and C, and then you can watch as they all type and fill in this Freyer model vocabulary at the same time. Then when they're done, the person who opened the attachment has to then submit the attachment, but everybody else can still click submit and theirs will just be blank. So a best practice is to make sure that everybody in the group writes their name at the top of the assignment in the Google Doc or Google Sheets, whatever you did. You can check it out in version history to see who wrote on it, but it was always easy for me just to have a little place at the top and they would all just type in their names. So this works with slides, docs, sheets, Jamboard, basically anything that's Google. You can look at the version history and see who worked on it. So group worksheets, group assignments, group essays, posters. You can use Google Drawings for group posters. It's so easy to do and assign it in Classroom and grade it in Classroom. And then you don't have to worry about, well, Miss, Johnny took the poster home, so I wasn't able to help him last night. Because that was always the issue I had with group work when it's on a piece of paper. Another great idea for group work is to assign students in a class period to all have editing access to the same document. And this is great for a quick checkup or a quick homework assignment. So in my example here, we were reading Animal Farm, and I had students come up with thematic statements. So I would have them in the second column here write their name. Then they had to find a quote that supported the theme and then explain their thematic statement. When you assign this in Google Classroom, you have to make sure that they all have editing access to the same document. But why this works is as they're typing in their answers, they can see other people's answers. If you've got a table, boxes, it's easy so they don't all try to write in the same spot. It's going to support your weaker learners because then they can see examples of what's being expected. But if it's something like this where they all have to find a different example, then they can't just copy off of each other. Make sure that they don't erase each other's work because you can see it in revision history so that, if somebody does go in and deletes the entire thing, you'll know who did it. Then what you can do, so if this was a homework assignment, they each spent 5 minutes finding a quote and writing a thematic statement. Then the next day in class, I can have a discussion about theme with all of these examples. And I can even delete the names if I want to do it anonymously. So that's a great way to support students working on a big project together or all adding a small piece. I did a lot of like a gallery walk where kids would walk around the room and put a sticky note on different posters. You can do that too in Google Classroom. Just make sure that all the kids have editing access to it. And if you're worried about kids being stinkers and erasing stuff, deleting stuff, it does happen. It is a learning process. But then with version history, you can go in and see who did it and then appropriately, take care of the kid who needs to be taken care of. Posters. I love doing digital posters. I like doing drawing posters too. Kids need physical art, but digital art is also good, and it's a quick way to assess their learning in a different way. So some ways that you can do digital posters are Google Drawings, Google Slides, and Google Jamboard. And I have linked here trainings for all three of those in case you're not familiar with any of them. All of these tools, Drawing, Slides, and Jamboard, can be shared with multiple students for group work or assigned individually. And they can even be printed. So sometimes I would have students make posters of vocabulary words, then I would print them and hang them up around the room. So I've got my word wall, but it looks really nice. Oftentimes when kids made posters, they'd have terrible handwriting. And then I'm like, that's not a great word wall because we can't read it. If you do have students make posters on paper, they can take a picture of their poster using their Chromebook or their phone, and then they can upload it to Classroom for easy grading. So instead of taking home 50 pieces of poster board in your car, which can be really hard to do, if they all upload pictures of their poster to Classroom, then you can just grade it from there. The nice thing about grading from Classroom is that you can make comments on pictures without actually writing on it. So you don't ruin their original poster. When students turned in posters for me, I never actually wanted to write on it because it would ruin their original, but I did want to give them feedback. So this is like the best of both worlds. You can give feedback without ruining the original. They can also take their picture of their poster, add it to a Google Doc, and then they can write about it. So having them create a piece of art and then write an explanation of their art is a great way to include, digital tools with physical art or physical activities. Showing work, if you've got something like math problems, using Google Jamboard, whiteboard.fi, whiteboard.chat, or Snap and Read, those are all great for using, like drawing out the actual steps to a problem. Using your keyboard to write out a math equation is really hard, but with these tools, students can use their touchscreen Chromebooks, or if they have a mouse or their trackpad, and actually work out a problem physically, and then you can grade it as a teacher. And if you're using whiteboard.fi or whiteboard.chat, you can see all their screens at once, or you can use GoGuardian to see them all at once to make sure that they're all working on the same thing at the same time. Note-taking. I love to have students take notes physically because of that hand-brain connection. So you could have students take notes on paper and then take a photo with their Chromebook camera and upload it to Classroom or Seesaw. Great for practicing handwriting. They can handwrite whatever and then take a picture and upload it. Another way to take notes is to give them a doc of something you'd like them to read, and they can color code for topics, or they could use the comment feature in docs to take notes. Or you can give them a PDF and they can use Snap and Read to comment and annotate the notes. So, and then just a consideration, teach a consistent note-taking style. We used Cornell at my old school, but whatever note-taking style is going to work best for you and your students. And then some enrichment ideas, things like esports, Girls Who Code, virtual school clubs. I don't know about your high schools, but I always had a hard time with clubs because kids can't stay after school if they take the bus. Do a virtual school club, have a meet, Google Meet, and then they can meet from their homes and do clubs after school. So there's a lot of different ways that we can enrich students' lives with different clubs and activities that they might be interested in.